Okay, it's 5 after. I think we're gonna get started. Thank you to everyone who's able to join us tonight. We have over 250 people on, and some really amazing panelists who I'll take the time to introduce throughout this call. I'm here, so I'm Lisa Shu. I'm an organizer with Labor Notes. I'm here with two of my coworkers, Keith Brower Brown and Luis Leon. Um, and tonight, our call is going to last for about an hour. We might go a little over. And we're planning to provide organizing resources throughout the calls. We're going to drop links in the chat. We're really glad all of you could join us. So a little bit about Labor Notes. If you're new to Labor Notes, we are a media and organizing project, and we've been working to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. We have a magazine, website, books, conferences, and we do a lot of workshops, promote organizing and aggressive strategies to fight concessions and build unions that are run by their members. So one thing I wanted to mention is registration is now open for the 2024 Labor Notes Conference. We'll drop the registration link in the chat. At the end of this call, we're going to have another guest, Naz Mohit from U.S. Labor Against the War and Racism, talk about the organizing they're doing. The Labor Notes Conference is another place where we're hoping to continue the discussion about taking action for Palestine. So that'll be in April 2024, and we'll drop that link. Another link we'll drop is a handout we created on how to talk to your coworkers on taking action for Palestine, whether that's passing a ceasefire resolution, taking industrial action, or any other kind of action. So it's based on our organizing conversation guide from Secrets of a Successful Organizer. And we'll also drop that link in the chat as well. So I think now I'm going to turn it over to Keith to provide a little bit of background about why we're all here and why this is such an urgent conversation for us all to be having.
Thanks, Lisa. Hey, everybody, I'm Keith. I'm an organizer and a reporter with Labor Notes. So as our amazing speaker list in front of us shows, there is a huge amount of rank and file action picking up across the United States and across the world in solidarity with Palestine right now, trying to win a ceasefire, many people trying to bring an end to apartheid and what looks like ethnic cleansing to many of us. We are here today not to present an official Labor Notes view from our small staff or to give speeches at the already initiated, but we are here to talk about how to build a broader movement, how to get more of our coworkers involved, get more of our communities involved through that amazing lever that is the labor movement we have been building together. So what we're going to focus on is how we talk to our coworkers, how we find common ground, how we bring new people together in action that will A, make a difference right now towards a ceasefire, and B, build a braver and more political labor movement for the long haul. So I think a good piece of context that we should start with too is why so many of us in the labor movement are active right now on this front. Next slide, if you don't mind, Lisa. So what we at Labor Notes have been writing and talking to a lot of union activists standing up for a ceasefire. We're hearing that many labor activists, both those we've known already and those we haven't, are very concerned about the huge amount of civilian casualties being that Israel's attack on Gaza is inflicting, and on the system of occupation and apartheid that many labor activists feel has been driving this conflict and for many decades. Most of all, what we're hearing from labor activists is how much they're deeply pissed at how much American politicians and corporations are fueling this attack. There's billions, about $4 billion a year in recent years being given for weapons and military aid from the US government to Israel and its military. And the White House just proposed 14 billion more. So on top of that, many companies in this country profit hugely off of this weapons aid and off of this violence. So this is a lot of what labor activists are rising up to try and do something about. Next slide. So what can we do about it? We have built labor movements that are a space to come together with our coworkers to make public calls and resolutions and say this is where we stand together. And we've seen a huge amount of energy towards passing resolutions and putting out public statements. Some of them are listed here. But beyond that, there's organizing your coworkers to be a contingent at rally that's happening many more places than we can count across the US and the world in the labor movement. There's more direct means like refusing to handle arms shipments or blocking the transport and the manufacture of weapons that are destined for the Israeli military in this conflict. So we're going to get the chance to hear from people who have been a part of each of these kinds of actions tonight, including from multiple countries and many places in the US. And yeah, really appreciate you all coming together to learn and hopefully bring some inspiration back to your coworkers on how we build this movement. Okay, I'm going to hand it over next. Lisa, do you want to say anything to introduce her first? I'll go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. That was great. Yeah, so our first speaker is going to be Marcia Howard, who is the acting president of the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers, which just put out a ceasefire statement that also called for an end to the occupation and apartheid in Palestine. And I also spoke against legislation that's been passed in Minnesota against the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement. So I'm going to turn over to Marcia. So thank you for kicking us off.
Hi, all. My name is Marcia Howard. I am a resident of Minneapolis and a teacher here for 25 years. I'm also the first vice president of Minneapolis Federation of Teachers, but I am the acting president as we speak. We just passed a resolution, I think October 25, that, as Lisa spoke, calls for a ceasefire. And it's not a little controversial because it also calls for repealing the anti-BDS statutes in our state of Minnesota. And if you don't know what BDS is, it's boycott, divest, sanction. And some people talk about the BDS movement, which is a little different than just BDS period, which is for an old head like me. I'm 50 years old, and I was calling for the end of apartheid in South Africa with the same language. And those of us who did the resolution knew that some people would follow along with, there's some language that says that BDS and the call for repealing anti-BDS language, because the ramifications are this. Our state said that if you call for sanctions against Israel, you can't get a state contract. And that stymies, it stifles, it quiets people who want to protest, particularly people who are Palestinian immigrants who are still in protest of the occupation and apartheid of their country. We are just calling for that. And this conference is supposed to be about talking about how do you organize members of a union, an organization to pass something that is brave, I would guess, in this context. And I'm telling you now, in Minneapolis, in Minnesota in particular, we're used to holding the line in this union. I remember my union leaders getting arrested after the death of Philando Castile. I happened to be one of the protesters at George Floyd Square, which is one of the longest running occupied autonomous zones in American history. And my union marched into that square to support what we were doing there. And they continue to support what we're doing. But if your members are diverse in their ideology, I think it's critical that y'all remember that when you are organizing them, you cannot be so many steps ahead that you leave them behind. And so I'm on 38th Street, and I always use the analogy, sometimes I got to go to 62nd to get some of my people and bring them up. And they may not be at 62nd. They may call for a ceasefire, but don't want to say repeal HF 400. Maybe I can only get them so far. But if you can keep moving towards what we're all calling for internationally, then perhaps by the time all the voices join together, we could get them to this fight against the United States giving money to fund this genocide. We all know that the way that this nation contributes aid to Israel is basically a voucher system. We're going to give you money in order to get a coupon, in order to give to American weapons manufacturers. It's a grift, and that's too glib for what the result is. It's too glib for what is happening, the carnage that we're seeing. And so getting people to see how this system works is going to take a lot of one-on-one talks with your members. It's going to take a lot of education with your members. And then hopefully that we can all walk together in this call to action. I will say, though, when we made that call, when we made a member-driven resolution, it was done by procedure. It was voted on by the members. I think we had 11 abstentions, but everyone voted, and it passed overwhelmingly. And I'm very proud to be in Minneapolis Federation of Teachers and standing by this resolution. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now.
Thank you, Marcia. That was really well put. Our next speaker is Dave Pinkham from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 520 in Austin, Texas. And I think Dave is going to talk about how he's had some of these conversations with workers in his union. So go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Hi. My name's Dave. I'm in Austin, Texas. I'm a rank and file electrical worker and the apprenticeship here in our local. Would like to talk a little bit about what some of the conversations we had were like. And I guess just like to sort of start off, I just want to pick up on what Marcia was saying about being close, to where your coworkers and your union members are, not too far out ahead of them. And that's the sort of place that we started from, myself and some folks in my local who had a conversation about wanting to do this, which what we did, just to say up front, is we put a resolution to the membership meeting of our local to sign on to the letter calling for a ceasefire that's being circulated by UE and UFCW Local 3000, amongst other locals, right? So that was sort of our initial assessment, like, where are we? Where are our members? Where are the people that we know, that we talk to, that we have relationships with, right? Because it's like we want to say like all the things, but not everybody's there, but they can come part of the way along with us if we can, have good conversations that bring them, right? So I'll just like kind of reflect a little bit on what some of that was like for us. I'd say like here amongst the electrical construction workers that I know in Texas, awareness of what is happening was overall pretty low. People know things, people know there's shit going on, right? But like people kind of just know what they see on TV. I mean, that was like from like one of the smartest people I know, who's like an organic leader in our local. When I asked him, he told me, I don't know, I just know what's on the mainstream media, you know? So that's kind of the place that we're starting from. It doesn't mean those people are wrong or bad or whatever. It's just like, that is the society that we live in, and that's what we're being inundated with from every side. So that's our starting place, right? Conversations that I had with coworkers were overall though pretty good. And I mean, I think that reflects what we're seeing broadly, right? You know, from different people, just depending on their sort of political leanings, you know, you get sort of like a war and violence bad sort of vague sentiment from people who are maybe like more liberal, and from people who are like maybe more on the conservative side, like, oh, they don't think our government should be spending our tax money to like bomb people on the other side of the world, you know? So like those are kind of some of the starting points. Oh shit, I forgot to set my timer. Well, okay, I'll try to not take too long.
You're good.
Sorry. Um, so yeah, just like kind of building on that. I mean, we approached this the way that you would approach any kind of workplace or union campaign, right? Like, I mean, well, we already knew what the issue was, so, but one of the big steps here is sort of identifying who the leaders are, like talking to people. You know, for us, like we're spread out in, you know, in the building trades, we're spread out a lot across a lot of job sites, right? So like the place where this comes together the most is at the union meeting, right? Like I'm working with one person right now. It's not like I'm having all these job site conversations, right? But we do have all these people that come together and the relationships that are established at the meetings, right? So identifying the folks there who are connected to people, whether it's via their workplace or whether it's via internal union organizations. Like we have, you know, internal caucuses in our union, like the Electrical Workers Minority Caucus, Women's Caucus, et cetera. Like talking to those folks who other people will trust and follow along with, right? And then you know, also a big one that we sort of considered was like, what does it look like to like be prepared and for the questions that are going to come, and to have like, you know, sort of like whether we can inoculate in advance with by answering some of those questions beforehand, or at least have answers prepared, right? I could list examples, but y'all can figure that out. I mean, the main one that we came up with, which ended up being the one objection at our union meeting, was, what does this have to do with us, you know? And so like being ready to think that through and like be prepared to like give that answer in front of the body of the, you know, the membership who are like preparing to vote on this. Like, you know, I think that was potentially like a make or break kind of situation, right? People, like, as I said before, people don't know that much about it. Maybe generally are willing to be persuaded, but like if you don't have the answers and you're caught, you know, caught sort of out and just being like, I don't know, I just think it's the right thing or whatever, like it's pretty hard. It's hard to stand on a leg, you know, two legs like that. So what else would I want to say about that? I mean, yeah, I guess in anticipating and answering those things, I mean, I think the goal that we, you know, kept was always to redirect the focus towards like what it is we're trying to do. What is the actionable item here, right? And for us, it was signing on this resolution, which is the primary ask is to call for a ceasefire and to call for, you know, all the politicians and all blah 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 to sign on to this ceasefire. And that was super helpful for us. I found that across the board in conversations that we had both before and after this happened in the meeting, that lots of folks said that basically they were on board for it because like the ask was reasonable, you know. And you know, I not saying that by way of like saying that we should lower expectations or whatever, but you know, meeting people where they are, like lots of folks with many different political views were able to come together around this demand that seemed very reasonable to them and get behind it and vote in favor of it, you know. And that allowed like us as a union to say like, hey, we democratically decided to support this position, and then for that to be put out into the world and, you know, sent off to the Democrats that we give all of our money to for election season. And hopefully, you know, that helps turn up the heat on them a little bit. So I think that is most of what yeah, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. That's really helpful perspective to have. So yeah, congratulations on being able to yeah, organize that in your your union. So our next speaker is Dennis Kosuth, who is a rank and file school nurse, member of the Chicago Teachers Union, a delegate and chair of the Human Rights Committee in that union, and also a member of the National Nurses United, which I believe just put out a ceasefire statement as well. So I think there are 2 unions that have put out ceasefire statements. So if you want to tell us about how that organizing happened, conversations you had, and kind of what's next.
Sure. I appreciate everyone on this panel and everyone who's taking the time to listen to us talk. I hope this produces action across this country that's sorely needed. As labor activists, we often think about how the boss can be a force for organizing us because of outrageous things that the boss does. And maybe this analogy doesn't fit, but I believe that Israel's actions over the past several weeks has opened many more people's eyes as to what its project has been and is currently. And I think we need to talk about it openly. And this is an uphill battle in many ways because the US government and the corporate media, every time they open their mouths, they put lies out about what's happening in Palestine, in Gaza. And so it's up to other forces to put forward the truth. And in the Chicago Teachers Union, as educators, many of us felt moved to speak out. You know, 10,000 people have been murdered by the state of Israel, nearly half of whom are children. Here in the suburb of Chicago, in Plainfield, a 6-year-old child, Wadea Fayumi, who was stabbed to death by his landlord, who shouted that "you Muslims must die" as he first attacked his mother, and when his mother ran away, she came back to find her 6-year-old child stabbed. And he told her, his last words to her were, "Mom, I'm going to be okay." And this is the result of politicians getting on Twitter. Deb Silverstein, who is an alderperson in my ward, the 50th on the north side, sent a tweet out the night before saying, "Oh, we're having increased police presence because we're worried about Hamas having an attack on people in our community." And it's just outrageous statements like this, which led this landlord who's just consuming right-wing conspiracy, and not even conspiracy, just like mainstream CNN, talking about the dangers of quote-unquote terrorists on Iran every quarter. And that's what led him to take this action. But this still is a heavy lift, despite what's going on. Some years ago, the Human Rights Committee attempted to have something to say about what's happening in Palestine. And when politicians caught word of it in the state of Illinois through back channels, they were telling CTO, "You don't want to do that. You don't want to talk about Palestine, because if you guys do that, we might not back your elected school board." And to me, if you think about it, it's pretty outrageous that they would hold hostage the idea of Black and brown parents voting for their school board to uphold a racist, undemocratic state in Israel. At least they're consistent in their politics. But despite this, in this most recent round, our House of Delegates, which is representing almost every school across the district, 500 plus schools, we signed on to the UE-UFCW letter calling for an immediate ceasefire. It passed with over 95% support in our House, which is overwhelming. There was many speakers in favor of it, and only 4 people spoke against. And to be honest, the 2 people who spoke against were saying it doesn't say enough. It doesn't go far enough. So I think it kind of tells us where things are at. And even following that, there's been some backlash. There's a group of people who said, "Oh, we're going to jam us out. We're going to leave the union because CTU called for a ceasefire." There was an educator who on an internal Facebook page that we use asked about some advice. Should she wear a shirt that says "Free Palestine" in her classroom? And it created a great conversation of hundreds of people talking about how do we interact with our students around this. And then unfortunately, someone screenshotted that and shared that on Twitter to try and dox this teacher. So we have, despite this, I think we still have many supporters, because public opinion around this question is shifting, as I said before, because it's so obvious the outrageous things that the state of Israel is doing. Young people disproportionately support what's happening or support the Palestinian cause. Here in Chicago, Jewish Voices for Peace had an amazing action. Over 100 people were arrested, including our former president, Jesse Sharkey, this last Monday when they occupied the building where the Israeli council meets. Our current vice president, Jackson Potter, spoke at this event. B. Lumpkin, who is literally the oldest member of the AFT, just to put some perspective, she was 30 years old when the first Nakba happened in 1948, but she came out and spoke in favor of this action. So I think just to wrap up, the thing that I would say is unions do have to represent everyone. We represent everybody in our workplace, not just the people who want a free Palestine. And so we have to be conscious of that. So we have succeeded in calling for a ceasefire, which is a minimum. To me, it's the base floor that we have to ask for as activists and as unionists. But we need much more. So I think the thing is that Israel has clearly not been bothered by this body count. Our tax dollars are paying for this. If we think about how many hospitals, how many clinics should be built in this country that they're desperately needed, but instead are being spent on bombs that are just literally destroying hospitals, clinics, schools, and bodies in Gaza. And so we need to do. It's going to be a long-term fight to do this. And so as educators, a few of us have been getting together, not few, but many of us have been getting together and talking about how we can build this, not just within the confines of CTU, but as educators for Palestine in general. So I think that's something that we can do within our union, but also do work outside of our union as activists in general and build those links to fight for a free Palestine. That's all.
Thank you, Dennis. That was great. Our next speaker is going to be Holly Bolton, who is joining us from Australia. She's a rank and file. She's a second-year student nurse, also a nurse. Works as a nursing assistant at a cancer hospital on Wurundjeri land in Melbourne. She's a member of the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Federation, Victoria branch, the organization Trade Unionists for Palestine, which has been engaging in direct action, and the Workers' Art Collective. And Holly is also going to be screen sharing too. Some photos.
I said I was going to do that, and now I've realized I don't know how to do it. Oh, there we go. Share screen. Sorry, having a little boomer moment. Did that work? Yeah. Okay, I'll go ahead then. Yes, I just want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from stolen land. This is the land of the Wurundjeri people. Their sovereignty over this land was never ceded. The struggle against racism and colonialism starts at home, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So I'm Holly, I'm a member of the Nursing and Midwifery Federation in Victoria, also the Art Collective, and Unionists for Palestine. I'm also really humbled to be here with such staunch activists today. And I'm really proud to stand in a tradition of workers' power that has already played an integral part in bringing one apartheid regime to its knees. The bravery of the people that are standing here with me today, your ingenuity, your organizing, it's inspiring, it's invigorating. And I'm incredibly proud to be fighting on the side of comrades like you. So Trade Unionists for Palestine was essentially born out of the recognition that many of our unions need to be dragged into better positions when it comes to Palestine. This is like a rank and file inter-union coordinated nationwide push to bring our unions into a better position. And we have a petition that's going around that has thousands of signatures of rank and file and union officials across the country that stand for an end to genocide, an end to occupation, and supporting the pro-Palestinian demonstrations that are happening around this country. We had a meeting at the Victorian Unionists for Palestine where we separated off and we caucused as our separate unions. We brought together the different health unions, so allied health, mental health, the nurses, the midwives, and we met together sort of out of this shared recognition that as healthcare workers, we cannot turn away from human suffering, and as trade unionists, we have a duty and an obligation to act on this. Our strategy is absolutely informed by our aims, and we recognize that a lot of the official channels of the union movement are not open to us. So the question becomes, how is it that we meet and identify other healthcare workers who are standing for a free Palestine? One of the things that we did was we set up a little WhatsApp group. This is just like a simple way of us being able to reach out and talk to other people. In Victoria, we've got over 100 healthcare workers in this group that have essentially agreed that they want to be able to take action on Palestine. Obviously, it's one thing taking it from a WhatsApp group and out into the real world. So another thing that we think is important is to have a really strong visual presence as healthcare workers and to draw that connection between our workplaces and the workplaces of our Palestinian comrades that are being bombed in Gaza. we decided that we would do like a banner painting, also a great way to sit and like chat to comrades. So we did a banner painting and we made like a joint healthcare worker banner. This is really good too because our unions haven't been giving us flags for the demos, so it's nice to be able to identify ourselves as workers. We also wear our scrubs to the demos. Some of the nurses have been doing really cool stuff like painting like hospitals are not targets on their scrubs and whatever. Just like a very powerful sort of visual image of what it is that we stand for. Obviously, we also need to bring this stuff into our workplaces. So we've been making resource folders with toolkits that have petitions, information about who we are, contact information, so we can start to map the hospitals, start to identify why we might have like hubs of healthcare workers who are willing to take action. And so we've been putting these up in like toilets in break rooms. We've been using them with little QR codes so that yeah, we can link people up with those resources. And even just explainers and stuff so that people can sort of get an idea for what it is and why we're standing on this important issue. One of the other things that we're doing tomorrow is going to be, that we're doing over this weekend is we're organizing our first demonstration. So on Monday, we're going to have our first demo at the hospital precinct in Parkville here. We obviously want to demonstrate first and foremost our solidarity with our Palestinian comrades. We want to make it really clear that our workplaces, hospitals are not targets. But it's also strategically important. We've got 4 hospitals in this location. We're going to do it at a shift changeover so we can try and catch as many nurses, allied health, doctors as they're leaving the hospital, and just sort of see if we can meet other people. We're going to leaflet them, have contact lists, just find all of these ways that we are able to, as rank and file members, start to bring together a network of activists that actually have, we have the numbers, we have the authority as rank and file members. We can actually pull our union and our government into better positions on Palestine. I was also really going to be really quick here, just like 10 seconds. Other stuff that's been going on with Unionists for Palestine. Obviously, I've been involved in organizing blockades. The Maritime Union here, members of the Maritime Union instigated a call to support BDS and blockade Israeli ships as they were coming in support. There was like a jet ski convoy, which has like such wild energy. I bloody love it. But yeah, in the end, the ship didn't end up coming in, but there was a demo of about 1,000 people, and they're able to create like an urgent action list. So connecting the contact details of people that are essentially ready to mobilize at the drop of a hat in order to block any kind of Israeli ships, any armed shipments that might happen in support of the dock workers that are over there. And then finally, just sharing some of the work that's been done by my comrades in the Workers' Art Collective. We're a group of like unionists and artists, and we produce work in support of grassroots movements and the union movement. And I just wanted to leave it on this because essentially, the working class is the most creative, most powerful force in our society. There are so many skills out there among our comrades in the trade union movement that are just waiting to be tapped into. And I look forward to harnessing them all in the struggle for a free Palestine from the river to the sea. Thanks, comrades.
Thank you, Holly. That was really inspirational. Next, we are going to have a message from a comrade in Italy, where it's 2 a.m. So he's not able to join us in person, but he sent us a video. So this is a message from Giacomo Marchetti, who is a community organizer and member of USBWTUF in Genoa, Italy, which is a dock workers union. They staged a blockade at the port of Genoa on November 10th to prevent the transport of weapons through the shipping company ZIM, which is Israel's main logistics company. So Keith has a video queued up. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Giacomo Marchetti. I'm a community activist. I'm a member of USB, the union that organized the blockade at the Genoa dock the last Friday against ZIM, that's the national shipping company of Israel. And we blocked the main entrance of the port, and then we moved to them offices from the very beginning of the morning, and there was a sort of tilt chaos, a traffic jam, most of all of trucks, because we reached out to stop the main entrance, not all the port because it's much more big, and we reached out to go with a short manifestation outside the them office. As a union, we started this battle against arms traffic in the port some years ago against the Bari, which is a Saudi shipping company that transported arms in Saudi Arabia in order for being used in the Yemeni conflict. We made several strikes and several organizations. Now it's a bit changed the geopolitical situations. And 2 years ago, in the summer of the 2021, with other port workers of the other unions, we reached out to boycott Israel Navy that transported arms in the port of Livorno, in the port of Napoli, and the port of Ravenna. There's a long battle for us that is connected also to the safety condition of the workers on the docks. Moving arms, it's dangerous for the people, not only in the war theater, but also to the workers and the people who live nearby the docks, as Beirut tragedy of some years ago remind us. So, and this time it was a bit easier because everybody knows in Italy the situation. This is a massacre in Palestine, and the need to ask for a ceasefire in that kind of situation. It has been the first action. It will be not the last. This Sunday in Rome, with other people, we promoted a national assembly to boycott and to the arms traffic to Israel, and to begin a mass campaign of civil disobedience, because Italy has a strong relation with Israel. So how to do that kind of thing? We started some years ago. We were not a lot of workers to do that, and before we tried to make aware the people of the dangers of the arms traffic in the port of Genova. Now it's much more easy because everybody knows what is going on in the Gaza and the so-called West Bank. So I think we need to organize, not only as we are trying to do with other ports workers in France, in Greece, and in Turkey, and we will continue. Hello, everybody.
Oh, thank you. That's a great, very inspired by that call to action for this mass campaign in Italy that they're organizing. Our next speaker will be Stefan Young, who is a graduate student worker at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and he is also campus officer for United Auto Workers Local 2865. So Stefan, you want to tell us about the organizing that you're doing, which is also very interesting and a little different from, I think, what most of what's been discussed so far.
Thanks, Lisa, Luis, Keith, folks at Labor Notes for putting this together. Totally fascinating. So I want to talk about things that have been going on in higher ed. In higher ed, for example, in UAW, this was shared earlier in the chat. There have been BDS resolutions circulating among higher ed workers. I want to talk about an additional form of organizing that a group of us have been experimenting with in the last few weeks. And this is around research workers who receive funding from the United States Department of Defense. So this is a kind of strategy that we've quickly developed and are working out over the last few weeks. And it begins with like a very simple idea that in the higher education sector, among workers who work on university campuses, there's an obvious source of power and leverage that is related to what's happening in Gaza and Palestine, which is that research labs in universities get Department of Defense funding to the tune of billions of dollars per year, and that the research performed in those labs will directly benefit the US military and by extension, the military of Israel as well. So this can include various types of research, tracking systems, robotics, drones, fluid dynamics, et cetera, a very heterogeneous types of research being performed. The strategy that we've developed, the step-by-step guide, you can see as a link dropped in the chat. The way we've put it together, it's a strategy that can be tried out on basically any university campus that receives Department of Defense funding. Whether those research workers are unionized or not, this strategy can be tried. It can be done at various scales depending on your capacity, number of willing and able organizers, etc. The fact that this kind of organizing in universities, in the research labs, has not really been done before, gives it a kind of experimental nature. Ultimately, like, we don't know in advance what can happen, but because we know that the source of power and leverage is there, we're going to try it out. Basically, there are 5 steps to this approach. First, we research connections between labs on our campuses and funding streams from the Department of Defense or its many subsidiaries. Second, we identify workers in those labs, see what we can find out about workers through our union steward networks or other kinds of networks. 3, making initial contact with research workers in the labs and departments. 4, asking, encouraging, and assisting, supporting those workers to get meetings together to talk with each other, to talk among themselves within these labs with relatively open-ended agendas about what it means to receive DoD funding, how their research relates to Palestine right now, these kinds of things. From there, 5th step, explore options, possibilities, a willingness to engage in lab level or maybe even larger scale actions. One note about this approach, our contact, when we call up workers, oftentimes cold calling, we try not to immediately confront fellow workers with like a stranger on the phone asking them, hey, you have to take a position or a stance on Gaza right now. We try to acknowledge like the difficulty of the topic and frame it not as like we're asking you what you think, but more, we have received a call to action and a call to solidarity from trade unions in Palestine, and we are unionists who want to do something. Do you also want to be involved in brainstorming what we can do? The call is to halt the arms trade with Israel, as well as all funding and military research. That's what the call says, and we're trying to execute. So we offer this up and see what people will work with. So far, we have got to the first 3 steps of the 5 that I outlined. We're trying to get meetings together. As of today on my campus, there was a meeting in one of the best funded and most prestigious research departments where workers decided that they'll continue having active conversations. They're going to have bi-weekly organizing meetings around Palestine, including trying to reach out to other departments in similar fields across the University of California system. This is, a kind of promising early success. Last thing I'll say about the higher education sector is that, as you all will have seen, university campuses have a high degree of visibility now in the media around campus culture, censorship, repression, these kinds of things. These are certainly happening in the University of California system, and we have had departments on my campus, for example, meet across units of workers, graduate student, TAs, faculty, precarious lecturers, and so on, to try and strategize together how to resist attempts to single out workers for retaliation and punishment, and you know, kind of push back on the icy climate that has been shown on U.S. university campuses so far. Unions can and do have a place in this kind of anti-repression work, especially on university campuses, and we should make note of it.
Thank you, Stefan. That was really, really interesting. Our next speaker is Tiana Reed, who is a member of the National Writers Union Freelance Solidarity Project, which is a division of freelance digital media workers within the National Writers Union. And she's also affiliated with Writers Against the War on Gaza. So Tiana is going to tell us about the amazing work you all have been doing organizing media workers who have been targeted quite a lot during this period.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. I could also say my full-time job is a professor, so I'm part of the York University Faculty Association, and I really appreciate the discussion around campus-based organizing. But just to start off with a few historical notes about NWU, I want to kind of say that we're a member of the International Federation of Journalists, which is alongside our sister union, the Palestine Journalist Syndicate. So that ongoing relationship with PJS has allowed us to understand that Palestinian journalists have lived and worked under occupation, siege, and apartheid laws for more than 7 decades. And so we've seen how media workers, our peers, our colleagues have long faced intensely dangerous, lethal working conditions as they report on and tell stories of the multidimensional truths of Palestinian life. And that is a quote from an event that we put on last year in 2022 called Reporting from Occupied Territory, a conversation with Palestinian freelance journalists, and we co-hosted that last year with Jewish Currents. So I start with that not simply to emphasize the longevity of the occupation, but also to say that prior to this most recent surge of terror and brutality, where we've seen Israel actively targeting journalists, FSP and NWU have considered the question of Palestinian liberation and this question too of solidarity as a kind of dance between sameness and difference. And that leads me to my role as I co-lead the Solidarity and Political Education Subcommittee. So we already had a space to do solidarity organizing and a space to think about political education, which made the question of mobilizing our members in the last 5 or so weeks have a venue for that. And so first we held a virtual ad hoc meeting, about a month ago, and there were more attendees at that meeting than some of our regular recurring meetings. And so a number of projects and coalitional projects sprouted from that. And I'll just give a quick overview. The first is around organizing in response to retaliation against media workers for expressing pro-Palestinian views. One example is we put out a survey on retaliation where we're attempting to document, archive retaliation, and also provide support for people who are experiencing job loss, material repercussions, mental health issues, doxing, harassment. Another thing that we started doing was mobilizing members to participate in phone banks, direct action, marches, sit-ins. A number of our members were at the sit-in in New York, I'm blanking on the train station name, and also workshops organized by other organizations like JVP, but also Writers Against the War on Gaza. And so we've started sending out this rapid response email newsletter that we're calling the Solidarity Digest. And we get suggestions from our members on what to include, and we've been sending that out twice a week now. And I think also another project that has sprouted is because we're a union of media workers and writers, we know about, especially, for example, from the post 9/11 period, the role that media can play in manufacturing consent for war and state violence. So we're also trying to collaborate on op-eds, reporting to shift and challenge the racist capitalist media narrative that is clearly skewed to abetting genocide. And to close, I just want to point to some of the larger stakes and kind of challenges that we've had, which is, I think for us, the fight for Palestinian liberation itself has mobilized members, but there is a lot of fear against speaking out and organizing around genocide. But there's a fear that this will cause unions to lose members or public support. And we certainly have lost some members, and I kind of don't want to gloss over the struggle that it has been to be in conversation. But I think the fact that NWU made it clear that this is a space where we're organizing in support of Palestine, it has been hugely energizing for a lot of members, and I've interacted with people I've never interacted with before, both inside the union and across unions. And so it's demonstrating, I think, how people want their workplace to be somewhere where they can do solidarity work. And I think it's an argument against this sort of stay in your lane organizing that I think, even as we're focused on journalism, discursive violence, and the media landscape, we see very clearly that labor isn't a single issue politics. Marcia was talking about the apartheid in South Africa and Philando Castile. And so I think for me, the question of Palestinian self-determination and autonomy exceeds that of labor. Or I'm thinking about how, Fanon wrote about stretching Marxism, and I wonder about how we can stretch the labor movement to deal with ongoing colonial problems. Thanks.
Thank you, Tiana. That's amazing, the amount of organizing that's happening. That's really amazing. Our last speaker on our panel before we go into a little bit of Q&A is Samira Hossam Ahmed, who is a death doula and energy worker based out of Chicago, Illinois. She works in memory care, providing support and companionship to elders living with neurocognitive conditions. She's also a member of the Palestinian Feminist Collective. So Samira, feel free to add more to that if you like, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, everybody, all the workers here, the nearly 400 people who joined us this evening. You've been talked at a lot, so just take a breath. And my name is Samira. I'm here in Chicago, and I am a death doula and a domestic worker, and I do take care of elders with memory loss, including Alzheimer's and dementia. My father came here to Turtle Island in the early 80s from Palestine as an undocumented immigrant. And he started off as a dishwasher and to this day is still a restaurant worker. So my experience as a Palestinian growing up here and as a working class person led me to become involved in the labor movement and find a home in unions and the labor movement. And so when I was a teenager, I became a student labor activist. I learned about labor notes, and it was in the halls of places like labor notes conferences where I saw that workers were the people who were speaking about Palestine, even decades ago. And so I'm very grateful to be here and grateful for all of you. I collaborated with the Field Museum here in Chicago on an exhibition they created called Death, Life's Greatest Mystery. And it's about death rituals and grieving practices and anything having to do with death science and all kinds of aspects of this important topic that all of us can relate to as humans and people. I helped, along with 4 other Palestinians, create 2 displays, one about green burial and one about our grief practices as Palestinian Muslims. This was a powerful experience. And in one of the displays, my father's cooking tools are shown. And as somebody who went to the Field Museum as a young girl, this was inspiring to me that, right, like even tongs and the thermometer were being elevated in a way at this museum, honoring our grief practices, honoring our burial practices. And it was a powerful experience. The Field Museum let us know that this death exhibition was going to transform into a traveling exhibition. And the first stop was going to be in Toronto at the Royal Ontario Museum. And so me and 3 other Palestinian women traveled to Toronto to see our work showed at the ROM. And 2 days before the opening, when I was already on the ground in Toronto, the ROM had a meeting with us and said they would love to show our work. And may all the people dying in Gaza and Palestine rest in eternal peace, but that we needed to remove the word Palestine from our displays. We needed to replace the word Palestine with the West Bank. We needed to remove the word exiled from our displays. And in the green burial display, we have a beautiful painting, and part of it shows a martyr in a kafiyah. And they said, we're going to need to blur out that part of the painting and put a quote over it. This was disgusting and violent. And when we went to the members only opening that Friday, my green burial display was not there. There was a blank wall. And our Beit Azza display about grief practices had no words. They removed the text panel. They removed the text panel that had my father's picture on it, that had stories from Dina Omar, that had a description of the objects that Malak Hanan's family donated. And to make matters worse, the ROM told us that because we are removing your displays, in principle, we are removing the Jewish displays. Shameful, shameful. And some warped sense of fairness, supposed fairness, based on their ignorance of not understanding the difference between Judaism and Zionism. They basically and actually and factually censored Muslim and Jewish stories from this death exhibition. And so when I went back on Saturday, because I was trained in the labor movement, because I was trained to understand the power that we hold with civil disobedience and resistance, myself and the visual artist and painter sat in for 18 hours. We did not leave until the museum agreed that they were going to show our work and that they would open it on October 31st. Our sit-in was on the 28th, I think. When we went on the 31st, our work was still not there. My father, the chef and restaurant worker who was featured in the panel, had driven through the night from Indiana to Toronto, and it still wasn't there. And we have been struggling since that date. The next day was Dia de los Muertos, where the artist named Norma, who created a Mexican ofrenda in the exhibition, her work was not shown on Dia de los Muertos. Her ofrenda, which featured her father's picture who died and her ancestors, was not in community. And so we in the Toronto community came together. We held a public altar. We held a public ofrenda where people brought items. And I'm out of time, but we are still organizing. We're still coming together. We have a lot of gratitude to working class people, especially queer people in Toronto who held it down, who sat in the cold for 18 hours when I was inside sitting in. And I just implore and encourage everyone here that we will achieve victory in this ceasefire. And that is only just one step. We must continue to fight for the liberation of Palestine against this 75-year-old brutal occupation. Me as a death doula, I want our martyrs returned. Israel steals hundreds of our martyrs' bodies, and they are held captive in freezers and in cemeteries of numbers. They need to be returned to their families to be buried, and we need complete freedom and liberation from the river to the sea.
Thank you, Samira. That was a really wonderful, inspiring end to our panel. We are a little behind schedule, but I think we'll maybe take 1 or 2 questions from the Q&A. So there've been a lot of questions submitted, so we're not going to get to all of them. I just wanted to say, even on this call, people were saying, oh, you know, my union just signed onto a ceasefire statement tonight, you know, wait for it to come out in the news. So momentum really does seem to be picking up across the labor movement in the US and around the world. So that's really great news. So one question we received, and you know, anyone on the panel can take a stab at it, was from workers in a non-unionized workplace who were worried about retaliation for organizing around this issue, having more limited protections. What are tactics you would recommend that they use, if anyone on the panel has advice for workers in a situation facing potentially a lot of retaliation?
Can I share something briefly that relates to that? I do just want to emphasize, and we've heard it before from this question and other people speaking to doxing, speaking to censorship. In our struggle in Toronto, about 70 workers came together, Canadian museum workers and scholars for Palestine, and they put out a letter, and a couple of them actually had to remove their names because their employers were threatening to fire them just for signing this letter. My advice is to form a union. That's my advice, and others can maybe add to that.
Anyone want to weigh in? I mean, it's definitely a difficult topic. In our handout guide on having an organizing conversation, maybe Louise, we can drop that again. We talk about how, you know, it's good to talk this through with someone, you know, inoculate your coworkers against what might happen, but there's also strength and safety in numbers. So the answer is organizing, you know, down the road, unionizing if you don't have a union. But, you know, I think it is important to acknowledge the reality a lot of people are facing in their workplace. Holly, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, like, yeah, I think, you know, when it comes to any organizing question, and I see Palestine as an organizing question, right? Like, this is something that we have to tackle through our unions, and it's something that we need to talk to our workmates about. And the situation in Australia is a little less repressive than what you guys are facing in North America. But, you know, we're hearing stories of nurses putting up flyers in tea rooms and management cracking down on them and taking them back down. We're having nurses being bullied in break rooms for watching like pro-Palestine content on their phones while they're eating their lunch, you know. I think, you know, one of the safest things that you can do is, like, unions are all about collective power, right? Like, that's why we join a union, is because we are fundamentally stronger together. And basic things like mapping. If you're in your workplace and you know that there are 1 or 2 other people that you can 100% count on to be on your side, to be pro-Palestine, then you talk to those people first. Those people are the people that you're going to have on your side. You don't have to do this alone. That's the beautiful thing about our movement, is that none of us is doing this by ourselves. You start out with those people, and then you start to appreciate the people, start to approach the people that you think are a bit more on the fence, maybe. And you work through your workplace like this. That's how you protect yourself and your colleagues from this crackdown. You reach out to other people, you build that collective power, and you take this fight all the way through as union members. Yeah.
Thank you, Holly. So I think there's another great question that came in. Sorry, one second. Okay. How would you all respond to the idea that we shouldn't bring quote unquote politics into union or caucus spaces? because it might alienate members. So I think a number of you have kind of addressed this, but if anyone wants to kind of say more about this head on, feel free.
I think it's interesting when people say that you should just stay in your lane. I had someone actually say we should just worry about teaching and that's it, as if being in a union such as MFT, which is affiliated with AFT, is not inherently political. And we have political power that we can bring to bear on national and international issues. I've seen a lot of questions in about AFT in particular on the East Coast. Y'all know that the president of AFT has actually been at 38 in Chicago, which, by the way, I've had the president of the United States call me a terrorist. But they stand in solidarity with me on issues of racial equality and have offered me so much support on that. And I need people to understand, if you've already brought it to the floor and it either got tabled and or it lost by, like, it was 45 and it didn't quite get their votes, you can always bring that again. So if you propose a resolution, just organize. That's all you can do, especially if you are part of a really big union where you're going to have people that may be older or skittish or more conservative. You just have to organize in order to get this. And the sad thing is, every week that we wait to use our voice, what's happening. Everyone knows what's happening. Y'all, we passed a resolution on the 25th. And even then, it was like, hurry up, let's get it posted. Oh, wait, let's wait for the other chapter to do theirs. And then by the time we got it posted, we had a brouhaha of, are y'all hiding the resolution you passed? What are you doing? And I'm like, make it go live so people understand where we stand. And then I don't think it's an accident that we post and then other people posting daily. Many people are adding their voices to this chorus of voices around the world. And so if you're in a union or if you're in an organization that isn't where you need to be right now, y'all, that's the work. It's work, and it is the work, and it's worth it. It's worth it.
Thank you.
I would just add that it is important to speak out. I mean, it's every day that goes on, there's more bodies being piled up in Gaza, children in incubators, infants in incubators whose electricity is being turned off because of this war, because of this blockade. It is incumbent upon us to speak out because, as people have said, silence is complicity. If we say nothing about it, it will continue. It's been continuing for decades, and this country has allowed it to happen. Our tax dollars are paying for this. There was a doctor who spoke with a rally in Chicago last week who lost his family members in Gaza and talked about his own tax dollars paid for the murder of his family members back in Gaza. And so we can't be silent on this issue because our silence allows us to continue. We have to make connections with other people who can speak out about this. Like I said, the actions of Jewish Voices for Peace is an amazing connection. It cuts against the lies that this is somehow anti-Semitic to speak against a racist state that is committing a genocide against the people. We have to divorce that idea that speaking against Israel is anti-Semitism, and JVP is in an amazing position to do that and has been doing that. And so the more we build connections with our communities, the more we build connections with our allies, the more we can push back against this edifice to stop this racist, murderous state from executing more children and people every day.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for answering that question, Marcia and Dennis. I think this whole call kind of shows how relevant this is to all of us. A very, very deeply felt issue for everyone. So finally, we are going to have Nas Mohit tell us a little bit about U.S. labor against the war and racism, which is an effort to bring union members across the labor movement together to organize around Palestine and related issues. So Nas is also the organizing director of the News Guild. So I'm going to turn over to you, Nas, and then we're going to close out the call.
Great. Thanks so much, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I can't see all of your faces out there, but I know there are lots of comrades in the audience tonight. And it was so wonderful hearing from all the panelists tonight. And I think the really amazing cross-section of experiences and just movement that has taken place in the last 40 days, I think is really a sign of what we have built, but also really sobering, I think, for many of us, just understanding how much work still is to be done. I just a little quick little intro for those of you who obviously I don't know. I started out in labor in 2003, and it was around the exact time 500,000 of us came out into the streets to protest the Iraq War, and we know how that ended. And that was an extremely daunting time for so many of us in the anti-war movement. But labor took a stand and took a very principled stand. And it was a historic stand at that time to oppose the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Labor has been overall almost entirely silent on the issue of Palestine. And we know that labor Zionism is an issue that we all, as trade unionists who care about Palestine, who care about the liberation of Palestine, labor Zionism is something that we all need to educate ourselves on and understand very intimately in order for us to really understand the terrain that we are operating in and why we are up against so much opposition in a lot of our union spaces, not just the fact that the American public is being lied to and has been lied to, but that there is a really entrenched interest to silence our voices. The barbarism of the last 40 days those are our points of agitation in our organizing conversations. When we say we need to agitate, educate, organize, when we need to inoculate our coworkers against the boss's fight, we know that Israel is repeatedly putting out lie after lie after lie. It is well documented, but we also know that we are standing on the side of truth and justice, and that as members of the labor movement, we have an obligation to fight for the oppressed across the world and in Palestine. So our organization, U.S. Labor Against Racism and War, we are invested not only in this moment, but in the longer term work, right? The long-term work that it is going to take to not just educate rank and file workers about what it means for a ceasefire, right? A ceasefire demand is the absolute bare minimum that we are asking for right now. We are literally just asking to stop dropping bombs on Gaza, and we are met with opposition. I saw that somebody just dropped in the chat that the AFT resolution was turned down this evening, which is not a surprise. And it really just underscores how much work still is to be done, how many organizing conversations we have, how many of us have to put our bodies on the line, how many more tools we need to educate other rank and file workers about Palestine, about the occupation of Palestine, 75 years. So this is not just about this moment. I encourage all of you to really think about this as a long-term project that we have to be invested in as a U.S. labor movement, and a labor movement that has to be connected to the international working class. Hi, baby. That's my daughter. So there are a few links that were just dropped in the chat. First, just a toolkit. There are obviously some really amazing resources that are circulating, sample resolutions that folks have shared. I'm so happy that Labor Notes produced this one pager on how to have an organizing conversation around Palestine. There is a Google form that is in the chat, Next Steps Google form. We are basically, because we have over the last over the last month, we've convened 2 calls with hundreds of rank and file workers from across the country. Our first call had 400 attendees. Our second had 200, which really just speaks to kind of the drop off that we often see. But we have received so many inquiries from members who just want to know how they can get plugged in to either with other unions or other rank and file workers across industries. So I encourage you all to fill out this form if you're not currently plugged into any effort to get involved in the different areas of work that folks are already meeting on. Divestment obviously is a huge one. Folks are working on political education. Folks are working on direct action. Layla, I'm sorry. So there are a number. You just grab her. I'm sorry. It's bedtime. It's my kid's bedtime. I'm sorry. But anyway, the Google form for your parents out there, I know you understand, this is life. So the Google form is in the chat. I encourage you to fill it out so that we can get you connected with other rank and file workers who are already working on this. To give you an example, there are folks across different industries who are very interested in the issue of Israeli bonds, right? Israel bonds and divesting from Israel bonds. There's already been amazing work that has been done on this issue, but some members don't know, and they're kind of reinventing the wheel and already starting that research anew. There are folks who just found out about the incredible block the boat actions that have been taking place across the country, and they don't know that there are block the boat actions that happened in 2021 and 2014 and before then. So we want to connect folks so that we're not all scrambling around like chickens without heads. Lisa and I actually were just texting about this. We need to connect our networks and our resources and our members so that we are sharing resources and we are building upon some of the incredible work that has already been done in the labor movement on Palestine. There's a rich history there. And for folks that are just new to this space, it's really important to connect to that. Our last call, I just want to make one more point about the AFL-CIO. We know that the AFL-CIO has a horrible history on international politics and certainly on Palestine. After our first call several weeks ago, we did a letter writing campaign, an email campaign. We flooded all of the top US labor leadership with emails. We have sent 32,000 emails to labor leaders since that call. Obviously a huge annoyance for them, but we really want there to be this groundswell of rank and file voices, letting them know we are not going to stay silent on this issue. We're not going to accept the status quo. So it's heartening to see all of these resolutions passed around ceasefire, but we know that the work has to go far beyond this and that we have to be connected with one another, sharing resources, building, educating our members, boycotting, sanctioning, divesting, and we will see a free Palestine in our lifetime. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nas. I think that's a really, really great note on which to end this call. One more thing I'll say is we got a lot of requests to share, like email out all the links that have been compiled in the chat and that which people sent us during this call. So I think we will do that. I believe we're planning to email out the recording, so we'll send everything out in one email. So there are a lot of ways for people to get involved if you're not already involved. If you're struggling on how to get this organizing started in your own union or workplace, you know, there are a lot of ways to connect with other workers who are already doing this organizing. And I just want to say thank you again to all of our panelists and to everyone who came on this call. I feel incredibly inspired, and I think it's really, really important that we all stay connected with one another as we're doing this organizing, because it's really not easy. And I think, you know, a lot of us are organizing under the weight of a lot of, you know, grief and anger. So very important that, you know, we keep coming together around this. Yeah, so lots of ways for people to stay in touch. Like there were a lot of forms that were shared. You can also contact us at Labor Notes. Labor Notes at labornotes.org. I can also share my own email in the chat as well. Okay, yeah, thank you. So with that, I think we'll wrap up, and thank you again, everyone, and we will see you soon, and hopefully maybe also see you at the Labor Notes conference in April, and see you in the streets. Solidarity. Good night.
Good night, y'all.